Between the hills, the stars, the sky, the river so clear, river so clear.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sonda, and I'm going to be doing something I was telling my partner on the way here that I haven't done maybe since high school, if ever, but I'm going to be reading a poem to you all that I wrote about community organizing when I was really in the thick of it. And so I thought just to kind of set the tone for our panel that'll be coming up, I would read this to you. We know the art of invisibility. We run on caffeine and stolen sleep. We know our homelands inside and out, though at times we don't see them for weeks. Doors shut, the ire of dead receivers. Dark drives down foreign roads tragically make us believers. Tried and true, we've tried it all. The ring, the ding, the order is tall. Few seek the truth, awaiting some call, but waiting for change won't change things at all. Because a moment sped down is a moment too many, as the shackles to tackle that bind us are plenty. And from minute acorns do strong oaks grow. It is from the shoulders of giants we fly with seeds to sow.
We join Unitarian Universalists all over the world in lighting our chalice. These are words from Representative John Lewis. You are a light. You are the light. Never let anyone, any person, or any force dampen, dim, or diminish your light. Release the need to hate, to harbor division, and the enticement of revenge. Release all bitterness. Hold only love, only peace in your heart, knowing that the battle of good to overcome evil is already won. Today we are hosting a panel discussion on community organizing, exploring what it is, its historical content and significance, and how it is we collectively build the power that creates these movements. We will have time for question and answers afterward or even during, because we're keeping it pretty informal. So I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves.
Good morning, everybody. It's so nice to see you all today. My name is Caitlin McDonald, and I think Sonda asked us what our community organizing origin story is. And I've had a few. I think, though, one that's really relevant, I think, is that I was the youngest of 6 kids, so there wasn't a whole lot that happened without, some sort of organization. So I think, now knowing what I know about organizing and what it looks like in the real world, that's where I started, was at home and organizing. Not well. People didn't listen to me as the youngest of 6 kids. But I think I started organizing there. But my adult origin story was probably about 15 years ago. And it was some really awful but tame by today's standards legislation against women's reproductive rights. And I felt really motivated and engaged to do something. And I worked with some of my friends, and we did a little art kind of demonstration project of putting flags on the Capitol lawn. And through that, and I started working on some of those measures on the committees of things. And then that turned into a job at the North Dakota Women's Network about 10 years ago. So that's kind of how I got into the fray.
Liz Anderson. My professional organizing started oddly here, or maybe not so oddly. I'd been volunteering. We were pretty new in town, and I was volunteering with my little kiddo at the Obama for America office in 2007. And everybody that I saw there, 90% all came here. And I had never been brought up in the church. I was not at all churchy. And this was the first place I came to church on purpose, of my own volition. That wasn't like a wedding or something. So anyway, and then fast forward a little bit, DRC, Dakota Resource Council, needed an office manager. Tammy Hathaway hooked me up with Don Morrison, who was the executive director at that time. And then a year and a half after being the office admin, I was like, this is cool. I'm kind of good at this. I should move into the oil and gas organizer position that had opened up. And so that's what I did. But really, organizing, I guess I'm the youngest of 5, so you got me beat by 1. Yeah, I had never really heard of community organizing. the first I'd actually really like he's a community organizer. But yeah, I think people do it a lot and they don't even know they're doing it. It's just, agitating people and inviting them to change and build power.
My name is Sonda Sauers, and I guess my community organizing experience professionally started. I went to an anti-war demonstration. Is this working, right? Yeah, okay. All right. I went to an anti-war demonstration in the Iraq War, and I had my name on a list, and somebody organized me and gave me a call. It was an organization. It doesn't exist anymore. It got wrapped up into another one, but it was called One Sky. That got wrapped up into 350.org. And so a lot of my background is around environmental issues. And so that was, somebody from DC called me and was like, we have nobody organizing around climate change in your area right now. Would you be interested? And I was like, what does that mean? And you're going to pay me to do that? Okay, sure. Not like it was a lot, but so that was how I got started, was working with different environmental organizations.
Informal surveying of folks to see what they might want to learn about the community organizing. And the question she was asked by far the most was, what is it? What is the best way, panel, what is the best way or your favorite way to explain what exactly it is a community organizer does?
That always reminds me of the movie Office Space. What is it you would say that it is you do here? I've used the line, I've never done a job. That's easy to explain. In community organizing or organizer in general, I should have brought it as evidence, but in my high school yearbook, I was voted most unorganized. The irony of me doing a lot of this work as an adult is not lost on me. And I also have a community organizer Barack Obama story, because one of the few people who knew or knows what an organizer was or is was my dad. And he was like, who else was a community organizer? Barack Obama. And then when we were doing the Women's March in 2017, and my parents stopped by while we were setting it up, and I'm just hoping to God that people show up. And my dad's like, it's Barbara Streisand and the way we were, she's an organizer, and she had her signs and the protest and all that stuff. So all that non-answer aside, it isn't easy. I think it's to define what organizing is, but I think what it is it's organizing humans. I think that's a really important part of it, is that it's the human part of it. It's not organizing papers or organizing whatever they judged me on in high school that I was so disorganized about. No, but it's organizing humans so that they can act together. And it's really one of our most foundational instincts as human beings, is to work together. So it's right there. And so then usually this is when I ask the person for money after explaining what organizing is and why we want them. No. But yeah, I think it's as simple as a human moving other humans to hopefully act together.
Yeah, I think community organizing is bringing people together in a community, and that can be localized or broader, but to act collectively, to build power, to change how things are in their community. And so it's about relationships, it's about communication, it's about willingness to agitate and live with tension, and be frustrated as hell because you see the path and they're like, no. So, but it is leading from behind in a way that changes and transforms communities, laws, and hopefully lives.
Something that I say often about community organizing is that I help people tell their story in the most effective way to create change for whatever change it is that they're seeking in their life. So whether that's helping them learn how to write a letter to the editor, which Ross talked about last week, whether that is, just helping them to learn to effectively create the story. Because oftentimes for me, I was in Green Corps, I did a lot of organizing where they would drop me in a place And I didn't know anybody. I didn't know what, like I organized in Havre de Grace, Maryland, which I literally had to learn how to pronounce the name of the town. So my job there is I'm not a part of the community. And so it's not my story to be told. There is an issue that this community is facing that they want to address. My job is to come in and help them most effectively communicate to the people in power to make that movement begin to happen, hopefully.
So we are wondering if you have any community organizing heroes.
One of the only community organizers I feel like people know off the top of their head is Barack Obama because he talked about it. But we know so many other community organizers, whether or not we know we do. And so for me, we opened with a quote by John Lewis because I picked that quote because he is one of my heroes. When I was in Green Corps, they had part of the curriculum was reading Walking with the Wind, which is his autobiography. And it was revolutionary for me. It completely changed my perspective on systemic thinking. And he talked about how at one point he had a police officer with his boot on his neck and putting a cigarette out on his neck. And in that moment, he practiced love. And loving this man who was doing this thing to him, recognizing that this man is as much a part of the system as he is, that he is as much a victim of the system as he is, because we are not born wanting to do those things, right? And that it is a broken system. And so practicing this love towards this man. And that was just completely changed because I was like 20 something and angry. I was just so mad about everything. And how are people not getting this? And right, yeah. It's definitely there for sure. Oh yeah. But that like idealistic youth, like just, not understanding other perspectives, like, and so, and he just, he literally from youth until he died, he did a sit-in during Trump's presidency, in Congress. And so, he's just, somebody that I really look up to and admire.
Dolores Huerta, who's still living, and she got like arrested for like 5 years ago in 92 or something. Like, okay, badass through and through. Did a lot of agricultural work, farm worker stuff with Che Guevara, another one. Paul Wellstone, who's a community organizer. Martin Luther King. There's a ton. And they just show, I think the thing that the ones that are really, it's a hard job. It's frustrating. It doesn't pay for anything. And their persistence, right? It's people like, oh, it's heart work. You don't need to get paid for heart work. Yeah, well, I need to eat. But that seems to me to send them through the hard times as their passion and their desire to really help people make change. And so the persistent ones are just, I just am in awe of them, because it is really easy to just be from young and idealistically angry to just old and cynical angry. So I'm trying to avoid that.
You folks have mentioned Martin Luther King, and I always...
Mother Jones too, sorry.
Oh yeah, Mother Jones. Somebody was gonna... That was gonna be the headline. Liz left out Mother Jones.
I know. You folk would be like,
I always think of, the first one comes to mind is Ella Baker, who was a community organizer. There would be no MLK without Ella Baker. And I've always really liked that. Part of my story of self, which is a technical term, for real, is my favorite part of being an organizer, and my favorite part of a lot of jobs, even if the title doesn't have organizer, is I remember the moments in my life where something was different. Like it was, I'm agitated this much, or I'm joyful this much, that something had to change. And in that moment, I couldn't go back to what I'd not known before or whatever. And being an organizer, you get to share that moment with lots of different people while they have their moment. So I think it's, I learned more from the students. I mean, there's that kind of thing, but it is that hyper localized organizing. I mean, some of the first feminists I really was familiar with were Catholic sisters and nuns. If there was a town that needed a medical clinic, they built it and they ran it. They needed a school, they built it, they ran it. I'm no longer Catholic, but we'd get into that another time. But those are a lot of times I think, and think about my heroes and the people that, the smaller the scale, the more lasting the impact. In Bismarck, I'm passionate about this everywhere, but violence against women and things like sexual assault and domestic violence. And 40, 50 years ago, Diane Zanoski and Bonnie Polachek and stuff like that, they organized a system that wasn't there to create something that we obviously could do a better job at. But I don't think a lot of people understand that there was no AARC. There was no. So it's everywhere you look.
What do you find most frustrating or, difficult about community organizing? And then on the other hand, what do you find most fulfilling or powerful?
I mean, I think the answer to both is the people. It is not the job of an organizer to, you can kind of make the decisions and you can agitate towards where you want to go, but there's you can be shut down. And good ideas, in my opinion, humble of always, can be shut down. That can be really frustrating. The joy, when we were looking at people and seeing how much they have grown, I knew when I was working to fight the Davis refinery with like 7 retirees in the West, this couple were really shy. They didn't even want to talk at the little meetings we would have. And they got up at Dickinson State in front of 200, 500, I don't know, a full auditorium to testify. And I just stood in awe at their growth, that they had gone from really not wanting to say anything at all to this very powerful, very place-oriented statements that I think, made as much of a difference as possible. So watching people grow and cross the bridge, right, from powerless to powerful, and you cross that every day. And we call the troll Kevin, no offense to any Kevins, but there's a troll that wants to keep you from crossing that bridge. And when they can face that troll and cross that bridge to being powerful, even for 15 minutes, that's the cool part. That will stay with them, and the next time it won't be as hard, and then change can happen because people are less afraid to speak out and speak up, which is a real deal here. There's lots of real life consequences for, I don't have 2 hands, but I used to like rubbing a cat the wrong way. Everybody here likes you to fit in, and if you go back against that grain, people are super unhappy with that, and there are real life consequences that can be not just ideological differences, but like real life threatening to people's existence and safety. And so, anyway, that growth, that personal growth, but also and I will say, I've said it before, but the pay is abominable. It's abominable. It is not, and this is a job that you don't leave at home. This is a job, you could literally do this job 24/7 and still have shit to do. There is always something to do, people to agitate, calls to make, one-on-ones to do. And so, not to be like all about the money, but like it is awful, and not all places, but that is something that really needs to be improved. And I would urge anybody who gives grants or whatever to make sure that part is covered. It's not just, the programmatic stuff. It's actual in-house costs.
Because I think we're maybe doing this without realizing it. There is a ton of jargon in community organizing.
Oh, yeah.
And one-on-one, yeah. Just in case you're wondering, a one-on-one is really like, that's a huge part of learning active listening. That's one of the biggest pieces of the job. And so, like I was talking about, teaching people how to tell their own story most effectively, those most often come from one-on-ones where you're listening to that person in a really deep way in order to help them tell their story. So
my favorite parts and some of the toughest parts, I think you mentioned Wellstone earlier. I'm a big fan of Wellstone stuff too. And one of my favorite things about community organizing is you can always do it. You don't have to wait for the election. You don't have to wait anytime. You can do it now. And the Wellstone triangle is something a lot of folks use, and there's 3 points. like a triangle. Community organizing, electoral politics, and policy change. And, you know, like the electoral politics, the human campaign parts of it really takes up a lot of the oxygen in the air. And so when people despair or when they're really, you know, turned off by those pieces of things, community organizing is always there. You can do something different. You know, you can do a lot of good in your community without ever mentioning a political party. That's not saying both sides are the same. But, you know, it's that you got to be a little bit of a Roomba, right? You know, Roomba's like, oh, this wall, I guess I'm going to go this way. Oh, bouncing that wall. And it's that persistence of stuff. But I think one of the hardest things to do as an organizer, and I always laugh like, oh, a professional organizer, you know, is organizing yourself. I mean, it really is. I think almost always, whatever we're good at doing for other people, we're terrible at doing for ourselves. Like, I will be a steward of your pennies that you have never seen. And then I'm like, oh, let's get takeout if it's my money, you know? So, you know, organizing yourself and, you know, especially as things kick up and get crazier, you know, there's no scenario where you're not going to be better prepared or better suited to deal with it if your mental health and physical health and spiritual health are stronger as well. And so there's going to be no end to the things to do out there. And the only way to endure through low pain or whatever we're going to face is making your organizing small. And what can I do to organize myself, organize peace for myself? Because you're no good to your community if you can't take care of that part. You know, I always think that's the best love letter to a community is, here's what I'm doing to take care of myself, you know.
Actually, Caitlin, mine was going to be relatively similar in terms of like the most difficult part. And Ross, last week, you mentioned something about during the legislative session, like, go small, don't go big, don't overdo it, don't burn yourself out, because organizer burnout is a real thing. How many of us right now are professional community organizers? It's something that is real and it happens. And I think, you know, I'm moving back that direction. And I think we probably all employ that in our lives, all the things we've learned and whatnot. But I definitely burned myself out hard. And it was because I couldn't disconnect. I couldn't go home and, like I think you said, Liz, it's 24 hours a day, right? I had a running to-do list that never stopped running. And I would lay in bed thinking about all these things that I needed to do. And because the impacts these are real impacts that you're making. And it was something that, it definitely burned me out. And so that was definitely the most difficult part, was the detaching. There were some people I had worked with. I felt like Tim Glaza was just amazing at being able to do that somehow. Being able to go home and just go home, not you know, but better than I was for sure. Right, yeah. And so that's a big piece. And so anybody who's doing anything like that, and I think that a lot of people in this room are doing something in terms of organizing in our community right now. And so I would just second what Ross said last week of low and slow. You know, don't burn yourself out because it's easy to do. And my favorite part of community organizing was one-on-ones. I loved doing one-on-ones. I loved just getting to listen to people tell their stories. And it's such a powerful thing to be able to help shape that, because the story, everything's there. I'm not doing anything. I'm the editor. That's really all I am. And so being able to see that, and then, like Liz said, watching them grow, watching some of these people grow from, you know, having never been involved to being constantly out there.
Questions I was going to add too is that, you know, we talk about how it's harder to find an organizer, or like kind of what it is. And it's always important to be aware of the danger of like the professionalization of advocacy and activism. And because it's important to have those roles, but when it's someone's job, we all as humans kind of make it not our job. And that's that danger with organizing, is we want those people that have it as their career, but there's almost a double-edged sword of competence, right? If they're good, then it's kind of like, oh, well, and then I can just take a break. And that doesn't make us bad people. That's just how humans work. And so, you know, you don't need to be a professional at it. You can do it today, tomorrow, you probably can't do it yesterday, but you can learn from yesterday. And so, yeah, don't think it's something that you can't do. And your definition of what it is much more important than anyone who's had a paycheck doing it.
What methods do you use, and what have you learned from in terms of stepping into the community that it's going to affect, whatever thing you're going to do, and how did you get there? Was that idea from the community? I would assume so. But how did that happen? How did you create the bud to get that happen? And I'm from I took some training with the Industrial Areas Foundation. I'm just curious, you heard of that. That's like from Saul Alinsky's model, Rules for Radicals, good book, But not that you're doing anything so radical, but if there's not a water pump in their neighborhood, how do you get them to do it?
I would say that I've worked both where it's come from within the community and without. So because I've worked in larger regional networks and I've done like systems thinking with like big overall movement, there are times where it's, we're up at the top and we're lobbying, we're doing grassroots lobbying in Congress. And so we're doing those things at like a larger space. And that's kind of the again, grassroots is we're building up. So, but then I've also done really small scale things. And sometimes it's, maybe I wasn't doing it professionally and I was like, this is a problem and we need to deal with it. And I organize around that, or you see a need for it in terms of, man, there are a lot of people who are talking about this issue and, some of them might want to be making change and not know how. And that's a point in which you can also step in. Yeah, I don't know if that kind of gets at it, but. Yeah,
I bet you do. I bet you do. You'd be right. I think all things start with curiosity. When I was doing union organizing for North Dakota United, one of the things, one of my coordinators, it was her line that she came up with was rediscover the beauty and the joy of like curiosity. And so it starts with asking questions, because if you're going to try to get in a community that you're not from, and you got to start by asking questions. And even though you're the expert on organizing, you are not an expert on their lives or their community. And so having the humility and the questions.
What is the step that got you in front of the group in the first place?
Well, that's a lot of stuff you can't really model or even control. I think that's where it's really hard to replace that authentic, hey, I had this problem in my neighborhood and I called Caitlin, who kind of knows about this, and she told me somebody else. I don't think there is. I think, that's kind of a step one regardless of where you're going. But I think the closest it is, to get in front of a community, you start going to their events without an agenda. You go to the farmer's market, you go to the you go to the events and just be present and without an agenda. And you're so used to kind of, well, I got to get these contacts done and I got to push this in the election and all that. But you will get much further if you just show up as a nobody and listen to the community talking, and you kind of can hear things. So now I'm
the way that we did it, the last organization I was working at, United Today, Stronger Tomorrow, I'm absolutely sold on it. It is digital, and people would send, like they were going to build a ski hill in Iowa using COVID money, and they would send a text to everybody they got from the van. Maybe they would use the van is like the voter access network, and it can identify people's parties and how often they voted. Anyway, it's a good database, and text them, hey, did you know that this money is going to go to a ski hill in whatever? Do you think, is that something that you think is a good thing, or would you rather see it spent somewhere else? And people respond to those texts, and then you have them. They come in and they go through this thing, and then also digital ads. They would do these short little videos, and then they would have questionnaires, and then they would get people's contact information, and then they would follow up. And the problem with text is that you're sending out, 200, 500 texts, and you have to get on it right away. I mean, it is like, you don't play around when you get people to respond, you got to answer right back. But that was one of the most effective, fastest ways to get a large group of people aware of an issue and coalesce, then we would ask them to come to a virtual meeting or even an in-person. And so that was really so much faster than like the North Dakota way, which also works, but it just takes a lot more time, and not everyone is so receptive.
Oh, okay. So my question is, how do you combat discouragement when the task seems too daunting or there is too much opposition? And I'm thinking of the North Dakota legislature.
You mean discouragement in the general populace or within, like, myself as the organizer? I guess the answer is probably the same. I'll try to keep this brief, but one of the first things I ever did was organize a fundraiser for Haiti during the earthquake in 2008, I believe, and almost nobody showed up. And I cried all the way home. There was a dance on my college campus that everybody was at. Right, yeah. Which is on me for, organizing it during that time, you learn. But I think the way that I have learned to combat that is in myself is to celebrate the small wins, and then help model that for others. And I think, kind of going back to what Caitlin said, it's these one small actions, even if it's self-care, and modeling that for folks, like taking one action, whatever it is, even if it's like, I'm depressed and I'm going to shower today, or I'm going to call a friend, and then moving from there, because sometimes self-care is literally all you can do in these moments. Like, if you can do that, awesome. And then rolling that forward, right? And now I'm going to make connection, and now I'm going to come to the UU and I'm going to listen to this talk. And so just helping to encourage those small wins, whether it's in our personal lives or, moving the needle almost imperceptibly, but, finding those small wins within that.
Yeah, celebrating the wins. And at least with the work that I did with Fort Berthold Protectors of Water and Earth Rights around oil and gas happening up that way, I had to reground myself that it wasn't really about me, and that these people are not doing it because they think it's fun necessarily. People are working on this because they have to, because it's life and death, because they want to have their kids and grandkids have a safe place to live. And so it's about reaching back and remembering why I started this work in the first place. And, sometimes you got to go and you got to lick your wounds with fellow organizers. And that was why I miss office work, is because you could come back after a shitty meeting. I had 3 people show up, and 2 of them talked, and they were staff, and just say that. And people are like, man, been there. So, but here's this and here's that. And so, it's just a lot of, it's just facing it, right? And if it's really not that fun, and if it's really, you can't give it all away to the work, but giving it away is part of the beauty of the work.
Thinking about how to kind of counter the despair and different things like that. I think just like any other traumatic or tough situations, is the number one step is to despair, is to feel it, is to not skip that part. I think that's really important. And I think a lot of us organizers, professionally or not, the little bit of the Leslie Knope syndrome, right? And it's that thing that makes you awesome sometimes, and it's that persistence and things like that. But that engine, will burn you, and not just burn out, but allowing yourself or the people that you're trying to organize with, validate that despair, validate that ick today, and know that there's no rally I can put tomorrow or no email blast I can send out that's going to make this all better. And so there's some of it is kind of knowing the limits of what community organizing can do is actually takes the burden off, right? Is that there's no organizing I can do that's going to make me feel better about tomorrow, right? And so, but that doesn't mean there's not organizing to be done.
It seems like there's one version of this, and I can relate to a lot of this as being self-employed and trying to, spread the message of health and wellness and whatever, and organizing events and stuff for that. There's a version of it, like you alluded to, with the sisters doing their thing, a sort of religious, spread the gospel version, and this other liberal politics version. How do you see those interplay and your own personal spirituality, like to stay in it without getting burned out. You know, because I can see it being a different experience when you're in that structure, that religious world, versus like how you've experienced it.
So how do you gel those two kind of versions? I think it's, you know, the term, one of the terms always gets me eye rolling, identity politics, you know, because it's a, you know, it's a euphemism, a slur by another name. But there is a kernel that's useful in there, and that is understanding what makes us us and what makes us, what's a part of our culture and our identity. And so whether, you know, the thing that got you to working with other people organizing is your faith or a secular, non-religious thing, you know, it's about finding what drives you regardless of the details. You know, like if these walls melted around, there's some of us will just kind of be like, well, all right, I guess we got to get the garbage bag and, you know, kind of things like that. And so it's listening to your own instincts, I guess. I think because the things that, you know, I came from the Kennedy Catholic kind of background, and that social justice aspect is real similar. It's the same thing that drives me when I'm doing more progressive politics and things like that. And I think, you know, that hunger for faith or justice or connection, it doesn't matter what the name of the group is on the door. You know, I think it's that human hunger.
For me, I'm a little bit of a purist around like community organizing versus advocacy versus service. I think you come into a group to work on something with agreements. If you're coming through the church, then those are the agreements that you're working within those constraints. DRC and everywhere else I worked, politics, and is that you give me the hook? Politics, religion, personal opinion of mine didn't matter. They're not, we are apolitical, non-political. I don't have a religious, as some people here would think of, like affiliation. So I think we were working at root problems and trying to fix what's actually going on and causing the things. We're not, I mean, we advocate for things, but not like the Catholic Bible is the only Bible, you know. So I don't know. I didn't find it a struggle, but sometimes it was a struggle to convince people that that was the way it was. Like, I don't have politics. I just have a desire to get, like, the Venn diagram of what we're doing here doesn't have to include any of those other things. It just has to be about what we're trying to fix.
We will extinguish the chalice today with these words by George Bernard Shaw. This is the true joy in life, being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it what I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. For the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no grief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch which I got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations.
Put a little love in your heart. Put a little love in your heart. You want the world to know. You won't let hatred grow. Put a little love in your heart. I hope when you decide this will be your guide. Put a little love in your heart, and the world will be a better place. And the world will be a better place for you and me. Just wait.